Come on. Oh, come on. Here. Ah! Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Michael Markowsky. Welcome to my studio. Today we're going to be recreating another painting by another one of my favorite artists. Today is day 2 of our look at the Belgian painter René Magritte. Yesterday we did perhaps his most famous painting, which is The Treachery of Images. In fact, it's here to describe it when we've got an image of it right here. So this is the painting we made yesterday. If you want to watch that video, you want to make that painting, you can watch that video. There's a link in the description below for it. And there's a whole playlist of other videos. Now today what we're going to do is we're going to make this painting here, The Great Family or The Big Family, depending on the translation you want to pick. And René Magritte, along with all of the other surrealists, loved playing with words, loved puns. So I'm sure he would have been very happy with multiple interpretations of the titles for his work. And he wrote a lot about the importance of poetry in his work, and he thought of his artworks as poems, in that poetry can mean different things to different people, and is not always as clear as advertisement, for instance, which tells you exactly what it is and what they want you to do, which is to buy or consume whatever product or service it is, right? Poetry can often be a little bit ambiguous, and this painting is a perfect example. What is going on in this painting? We'll talk all about some of the ideas that other people think, some of the ideas that I think is going on in this painting. We're going to get to that in a moment. I'll let you know that there's an outline for today's painting, just like there was an outline for yesterday's painting. And I'm going to show you where you can find these in a moment. But here's another painting if you want to do it, and an outline for that. So you can find all of those paintings and the outlines for them in a Dropbox folder in the video description below. You click down there, you're going to see a lot of files in here. These are all artists, all videos that we've already done. Today is, there's at least, it says 174th painting, but I'm sure there's probably in the 250th, because often we do multiple paintings in the same episode. So, I mean, we just keep on going all the way down here. And eventually we get to René Magritte, and there's going to be more coming in the new year as well. So we click in René Magritte's folder here. You're going to see there's 9 files. There's 3 of the images which I showed, and then there's 2 versions of each outline. One's a JPEG, one's a PDF, whatever's easier for you to print off of your printer. Just before we launch into how to get that outline onto a canvas, I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. I want to let you know there's a private Facebook group just for people like yourself. If you're watching, if you're new to the show, I encourage you to join that. There's a link to it in the description below. And what's awesome is it's a super supportive community of people just like yourself who are at various different points in their creative journey. Some people who are literally just beginning. There's a few people who posted, this is my first painting I've ever done. And there's some people who've been painting along with me for years, and people who've been painting for years even before they met me, right? And awesome work. And it's also stuff that's not necessarily things based upon what we're doing in class. Because the idea is eventually you're creating your own artwork, things that inspire you deeply, and you're only really doing the paintings that we're doing in class as maybe inspiration or to learn a different technique, etc. Okay, that is awesome. It is Christmas Day here, if you're watching it live, the show live, so we see a few paintings that are Christmas themed. But of course, today's episode is not going to be Christmas themed, because at least over half of the world does not celebrate Christmas. So I want to, and the people that do, sometimes people are alone for the holidays. So this is my little bit of an attempt to make people feel a part of something. If you know, because of the circumstances in the world these days, gathering together as families and friends is pretty much off limits. So we can gather together here as friends through the magic of the internet, right? We're going to talk about René Magritte's biography a little bit in today's episode. Of course, yesterday's episode, in the introduction, I spent about half an hour talking all about René Magritte, his biography. We looked at a lot. We basically looked at about 300 of his artworks pretty quickly, but we covered some of the basics. Today, the painting that we're making is one of the final paintings that he made. I mean, he painted literally up until the day he died. In fact, let's just scroll all the way down here. This is the final painting that he made, which was still wet on the easel the day he died in 1967. And today's painting is from 1963, and it's considered his late work, and there is some commonalities with some of the final paintings, and we'll talk all about that here in a moment. But how about let's talk about how to transfer this outline onto a canvas. I'm going to play a video for you because I've already done the transfer process, so I'll just kind of speed through this and get to the relevant stuff so you're not just sitting here watching me trace a piece of paper. So you see I'm going to need some tape and pencils. I'm going to do this on a 9x12 sized canvas board. You want to use the exact one I'm using. There's a link in the description for that. And I'm going to tape down the outline. Now there is a horizon line at the bottom where the sky meets the water, and it's, you know, it's generally desired for that to be straight. And you see I'm kind of looking at it thinking, okay, let's see if we can get it straight. Looks like it's pretty straight. Worst comes to worst, if it was a little bit crooked, we can always straighten it later on when we get to that step. I'm going to use some carbon paper to transfer the image onto the canvas. You can use graphite paper. I've even in the past shown how you can, if you don't have any of that, you can just take some pencils and really scribble on the back side of the outline and create a kind of a layer of graphite or carbon, and then you could put that directly down onto the canvas and then trace that, and it's going to leave an impression. So we don't need to watch this whole thing. Pretty self-explanatory, especially when we peel this off here. Boom, you peel it off, and look, you've got an image. The reason why it's also a little bit darker, the bird outline, is I just pressed a little bit harder with my pencil. And once you've done that, you're going to have a canvas just like this. And I think the way that I'm going to approach today's painting is going to be to paint the bird inside first, and then actually use some tape and tape off the bird to protect it, and then paint the quote-unquote negative space around it, the dark sky, and then peel the tape off to reveal the bird again. So it's quite likely I'm going to use this template a second time. That's why it's helpful to have an outline, is that we can do all of this, you know, another time. So bearing that in mind, that I'm going to use that template, just thinking how I want to go about this. Let's look at the original and just thinking, okay, so what I'm going to do is I want to paint the nice big bright blue sky first. So the way that I want to do this is, let me think. Okay, so what I want to do, this is probably a different thing than I've ever done before. So, at least using the kind of method that I normally do. So, It's always an experiment to see if we can make this work. Because whenever you use tape in an artwork, and I don't think Magritte used tape. So he hand painted this painting, which you could certainly do if you don't have tape. But I just want to show you a different method that I think is particularly useful for a painting like this, and do with this information what you may. Because I just used tape just a couple of days ago when we did the Robert Indiana Love painting, the Love, and I did one hand painted and I did one with tape, and the tape one did turn out, I think, better. It took maybe even a little bit longer than the original, so okay, so you can see I'm just putting the yellow that I put on the canvas all the time. I'm just going to put it on this little part where the bird is, because I'm probably going to paint over the rest of this with some white. So I'm not even going to bother kind of doing a lot of extra work. There's an eyelash caught in there. Here are we had an awesome Christmas morning today. We've only gotten through about a third of our Christmas presents. We have a daughter who is just over, well, I guess 2.5 years old now. Time flies. Which is a great way to experience Christmas. If you're a little bit jaded about Christmas, celebrating Christmas with a child will make you feel the magic of Christmas all over again. It is pretty special. And of course, she was most excited about all of the packaging and all of the little things that you know, the boxes and all that stuff. Super awesome. Okay, so what I want to do here is I just painted. I usually cover the whole canvas, but there's no point in doing the whole thing because I'm probably going to paint over all of this area anyway. So it's just going to save me time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to mute the microphone, blow dry this, and then I'm going to start painting the inside of the bird here. Okay, cool. So, let's paint the sky blue, and then we'll talk about who René Magritte was just briefly, more specifically his late work. Again, we talked about his biography yesterday, so there's no point in like just repeating myself. Let's put some paint on the palette, though. I'll put my labels on here. If you're watching me for the first time, you've probably wondering what the colors are, what the names are, and all of that information is in the description below. There's links to buy the paint if you want to buy the exact brand that I'm using. I'm not sponsored by anybody. No one's giving me any money to do any of this except donors like yourself. So if you want to contribute to the show, there's a link to the PayPal in the description below. And I just take all of these paints are purchased from the donations people give me to help keep the show up and running. So once again, I really appreciate everyone's support over the years. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to put a cool blue in the sky here. So let's take a look at these side by side. So I'm going to just take my... Oh, let's put some labels on this palette here, just to help people see what colors I'm using here. I made these little labels with Velcro so that when I clean my palette at the end of the night, they come off nice and easily, and they themselves don't... I'm not cleaning the labels off of my palette. Okay, so let's take some white, and let's put this down here, and let's take some blue, blend that together. That's pretty good. I might have to do a second coat of this just to cover up some of the yellow. And you're probably wondering, well, then why even bother putting all that yellow in, Michael? It just seems like a bunch of wasted time. And now you're painting over all of the clouds. Again, this is... I want to show a different method that I don't usually use, just so people can see that there's lots of different ways to make a painting. Even if I was not going to use tape, I would probably put the yellow all over the whole thing, and I'd be much more careful about how I apply this blue over top here. I would try not to get it outside the lines. Now I'm quite confident that as this dries, I'll be able to see the pencil lines a little bit better. Worst comes to worst, I can always use the outline and draw them back. My goal is just to cover up the outline here. Okay. That looks pretty good. If I miss any place, that's just where I can put a cloud if I want to put a cloud there. Okay. Let's just... extra little paint I'll squeeze off there. Now, I like that warm glow that's barely visible coming through the blue. It's going to be a little bit more apparent when I blow dry this again. And it's just a personal preference. Most people probably are not going to put that yellow there. I like the effect it creates and the look that we get from it. But I can totally understand if you're like, what? That's crazy. Okay, so I'm going to blow dry this. I'm just going to mute. Okay, and if anyone is sort of thinking like this is absolutely nuts to have used yellow, if we just look at this canvas, it's not just a pure blue in here. I know it's pixelated, but it does look like there is something underneath this blue. Maybe it's a little bit... He could have used a very delicate brown wash, which is very typical for artists. But there is something under here besides just the pure white of the canvas. So, and you know, as I look at it, it is possible. Well, I was going to say that maybe he did use tape, but there is some edges that it doesn't appear as sharp as it would if he used tape like I'm about to do today. So, but I think we're going to, you know, by the end of today's painting, I think it's going to look, we'll have some kind of similar qualities here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to paint some clouds on here. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to glaze some clouds on. So we've done glazing before. Let's, where's my glazing fluid? I'm going to use satin glazing fluid, which is a matte fluid, means it's not shiny. I do have gloss glazing fluid. You're certainly welcome to use gloss glazing fluid. I just always tend to prefer a matte surface, but I'm in the minority. The vast majority of people prefer glossy paintings. I prefer a matte look. Okay, so what I'm going to do, where should we do this? Maybe I'll put my glazing fluid here. And let's get that light on. Okay. But rather than just jumping right to the white, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some more white, and I'm just going to get a bit of this blue on here, maybe even a bit more white. This is going to create some the part of the clouds which are kind of transparent. Right, and all clouds are kind of transparent, or they are transparent, but when we get a large accumulation of them, then they become more and more opaque, right? So I'm just mixing that up nicely. And yeah, let's just wipe that off, put that in the water. I'm going to take another brush to use as a blending brush. Now you can get a specific kind of brush for this. It's called a mop brush. It actually, when they're new, they look like this. This is a mop brush that I've used for about 100 paintings over the past year. A cheap brush. I think I bought this for like $5, $10 or something. You can buy it on Amazon. It's a little bit, I think it's like 15 bucks on Amazon. But again, it looks, so if you're at the art supply store, I don't see one that looks like this. You might accidentally buy what's called a fan brush. Right, this is the Bob Ross special. This is the fan brush, which kind of looks like a mop brush. But you can see when we turn it, the fan brush stays very thin, right? The mop brush you want to think of it like a mop. Really, the primary use for a mop brush is often for watercolor painters, for putting on big washes of color. Okay, but if you don't have one, you can just use another brush that is relatively soft, to blend out the edges. So let's get a smaller brush here, and maybe it's worth just having these side by side, so I try to get the clouds in the general right place. I'm just going to put a little bit of glazing fluid. I don't want to have big gobs of it on my brush. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to blend it around. All right, and then I can take this and soften these edges a bit. Maybe let's zoom in here. All right, it's gonna look kind of sloppy for a bit. All right, this is just our first layer. All right, and it's these areas, you see where it kind of builds up some thickness? That's what I want to avoid that, because it gets on my mop brush. It makes it, then I'm sort of painting with my mop brush. You want to keep your mop brush as dry as possible. Right, I could even be using a little bit more glazing fluid in here. So we're right about here. Here's the bottom part of the bird. Again, it doesn't have to be exactly like the clouds that we see in the image, but if it's close, that's probably what most people would like to see. Okay, so that's our first little pass at it. So let's blow dry that really quickly. Okay, and let's just start this again here. I'm going to take this and let's in fact let's zoom in just so you could see where I'm working here, because it's probably a little bit confusing looking at my painting. All right, so I'm going to take this. We're trying to build up that texture. Right, and I can just, if I want to soften those edges, just delicately soften that out. We're going to build it up and make it darker or more opaque. Thank you, love. My wife just bringing me fresh tea. What a darling. Love you, sweetheart. Right, and again, just soften out those edges. And we can shape these clouds however you want. We can have areas of the clouds that are thicker and more dense. Is a should I thicken under here? Let's do that, I guess. Okay. So here's the beak of the bird right there, in case you're wondering. I'm going to lose the entire shape of this bird here. And it's just going to drive everybody crazy, and people are going to wonder what on earth this painting is of for quite a while. And then eventually the bird is going to make a reappearance towards at the very, very end of the painting. So it's a little bit of a, like a Christmas present, right? You don't really know exactly what you're going to get until the paper comes off. Now, as I've said a few times already, this is not the... I mean, in some ways we're doing exactly what he's doing. Painting the clouds is probably similar to how he would have painted these clouds. And I'll also say, you know, if you're not happy with the way the clouds turned out when you peel the tape off, it's probably likely that we're going to do a little bit of extra touch-ups here and there, especially right around the head of the bird, because you could see he added this kind of little bit of a shaped the cloud right there to emphasize the head of the bird. So it's possible that I'm going to have to do a little bit of shaping as well right in that area. Okay, oops, that was pretty heavy with that paint. So just wipe a bit, because that's a little bit too opaque at this stage. Let's keep on going down. So here's the legs are right here. It's probably not visible. So I'm just going to go right over top of them, just as he did. So some of the stuff around the edges, that's all going to be clipped out by the, I guess you could say, the background or the foreground, depending on how you want to think of the darker part of the sky. That's all going to be included or shaped by the negative space, or again as positive space, depending on how you see this painting. Okay, so there's another layer here. I'm going to mute the microphone. I think we'll do one more with this kind of diluted yellow or white, and then I think we'll finish with just a little bit of just almost pure white. Okay, so again, I'm just using this glazing fluid with just with white and this cool blue in here. And as the glazing fluid starts to dry, it's starting to become a little bit more opaque anyway. I mean, we could do most of this with just this glaze, this color, but I think to get, you know, that little bit more opacity, we're going to need to add white in at the last little bit here. But you can see now all of a sudden these clouds start to feel kind of more, they have more volume as we start getting some of this white in here. Just always softening it up to keep some of those hard edges out. And you can kind of, if you want, you can kind of keep little areas in the clouds where there's a little bit of the sky poking through. Otherwise, if it's just all one big solid blob, then it starts to look like a cartoon thing, right? And you know, right now, this looks, you know, my clouds. I'm not interested at all in trying to replicate the exact clouds that he has there. I mean, maybe there's an image there that I don't see, and but this is, you know, if when I peel the tape off at the very end of today's painting, and if I do end up seeing like a face or anything in there, then I think that would be the kind of thing that a surrealist like René Magritte would find serendipitous and be like, oh, that is great, I love how a face just magically appeared, or an animal, or a letter, or a word. You know, they would say that that was, you know, quite significant, right? And kind of right along the lines of what they're trying to do, embracing chance. So you can see, like, by doing this without having to, right now I don't have to worry about being careful about where my about doing any of this blending. I don't have to worry about the background or again, the darker area. And really, we could do this entire painting like this without using tape, and we could just, it would just mean the next layer, we'd have to be pretty careful about how we approach it, but it could be done. You don't need tape to do this. It just, I think, is going to create a really kind of neat result. I hope. Again, this is not how he did it, but that doesn't mean that we can't play a little bit and try doing something a little bit different. Okay. So I'm going to blow dry this again, and then we're going to add just a little bit more of white as a Okay, so this paintbrush, which I've been using to do the blending, right now it's got a little bit of blue in there, and which is not bad. If I add the white in it, it might actually work well, but it's starting to, the paint is drying on here, and it's starting to get a little bit, what would you say, like the bristles are getting harder. And it's possible that when if I start blending, I'm going to kind of start scratching the surface a little bit, and I want it to be very soft edges. Or, you know, I mean, that's the way that I want to paint my clouds, but It's, I mean, I don't know enough about clouds. Maybe there are some clouds that have some fairly hard edges, and you know, this is a surrealist painting, so kind of anything could go if you wanted to amp up the strangeness of the painting. So let's take some white. We're not going to need much of this. But let's take glazing fluid. In fact, I'll just take a bunch of this glazing fluid. Now, when you're glazing with white, it's pretty tricky because here we've got the glazing fluid, which is transparent, but it looks white. And here we've got actual white paint. So just determining how opaque or transparent your white glaze is kind of tricky. All right, so just keep that in mind. So once again, let's just kind of go up here. And want to be a little bit, let's get another brush to use for blending. So you can see I'm not putting white everywhere, it's just in a few places. You know, the effect is very similar to the one we just put on moments ago, except this one doesn't have any blue in it, right? So it's going to be more opaque anyway, and just a little bit brighter, or not brighter, I guess. It's just going to look a little bit whiter, so it's going to make these clouds appear to have just that much more volume. And I've lost the shape of the bird. I don't really know where that head is. I'm hoping it's somewhere right in here. And you know, I was thinking I was going to do another layer of white. I think I will do one more, but I might leave it, I might not push it all the way to the very, very brightest pure white until the very end of the painting. That way I can, based upon what is revealed, I can kind of make some decisions as to what part of the clouds to bring texture out of and what to hide and that kind of thing. So I think that's what I'm going to do here. I might just this might be the last layer of white for right now. Should I do one more? It's hard to say. Let me blow dry it and I'll think about it. Paula, thanks for the donation there in the super chat. I really appreciate that, Paula. It's very generous of you. Merry Christmas to you as well. Thank you. I'm super excited to see what you do today and what technique you use. There's René says hello. Lolly says Merry Christmas as well. But asks a great question. Have your mop brushes died? How come you're not using them today to blend with? Great question. Okay, so as mentioned, this is what a mop brush looks like when you buy it, right? It's got this kind of really nice shape, and you can almost kind of do fairly detailed work just by using the very tip of it. As the mop brush gets used, because often what you're doing is kind of scrubbing with a mop brush, at least when you're using acrylic, right? When you're using watercolor with a mop brush, your mop brush could last for years, because especially if you treat it well. But when I'm doing this, I'm kind of scrubbing the paint, and what it ends up doing is really causing it to bloom and to become less and less useful for fine detail work. Now again, I've got a bunch of these brushes, so I could use them. There's no reason why I'm not, but I guess there's a few things that I'm thinking. I like being able, especially if I'm doing very fine blending, using just another paintbrush that you have works just as well. And I know that probably the vast majority of acrylic painters do not have a mop brush. So there's, in my mind, there's a few things. It's like, well, I want to get really small blending, and even if you're using a big brush, sometimes you're only using a small part of the mop brush. You're often not doing big areas when you're blending. If you're painting with oil paint, you're probably doing that all the time, or at least there's approaches to painting that use it all the time. But so good question. I think it's just, I just want something a little bit more refined for the moment here. And sometimes I also think to myself, well, it's not really worth getting the mop brush too wet today, because I'm just doing such fine, detailed work with it. So, okay, great question. I think so. I just added a little bit more white here. And I'm just going to do a couple of tiny little pops. So we're almost using pure white with just a little bit of glazing fluid. And if you don't have glazing fluid, you could probably get away with doing this if you're blending very quickly. I wouldn't use water, but down here. You can see the water, so let's just get these kind of... do this wing. So I think the beak is right about here somewhere. And really, like, when I'm doing this, I'm almost just kind of like just blotting and stamping a bit. Okay, so that's step number 1. Big step. And this painting looks pretty crazy side by side with the other one. People are like, what? I mean, it's a surrealist painting, but he clearly has lost his mind. What on earth is he doing? So if you don't have tape, what I would suggest your next step would be to probably paint a fairly, well, you can see what I would probably paint this color down here. We're going to mix that color in a moment, but you could probably just paint it all over the whole thing, just going carefully around the outline. Now, I just sort of totally ignored the I mean, I didn't ignore the outline, but I did my best to sort of allow these clouds to go over top of the outlines and to ignore the outlines as much as possible so that I can take most advantage of using the tape, right? So I'm just going to want to clean up a few brushes before I move on to the next step here. Got I was wrapping presents late last night, so it's sort of like, this is not only my studio, but my present wrapping station here. Oh, this is, you could put, well, maybe I misread that, but you could turn this into a fire and have, rather than clouds, it could be a fire blazing in the sky in the shape of a bird. That would be cool. Have we done fire? We did a volcano a long time ago. Back in like February, well, I don't know, when did we do that? Time just blurs. Time has been blurring for a while, for just me as I get older. But over the past year and a half, as I'm sure probably a lot of you know, like, it's like, what is going on? Thank goodness here in Canada we have seasons where, you know, it's right now it's snowing here in Vancouver, right? It rarely snows, but last night it snowed for White Christmas. But I lived for a long time in Los Angeles where it kind of during January and February, October, it rains for a little bit, and then it's beautiful all the time, which is really great. I'm not complaining, but one of the weird things, especially growing up in Canada, I really began to miss the seasons, because for me the seasons is how I was so used to judging the passing of time. And when there's no seasons, you get this weird thing of like time not passing. And sometimes, like, you know, in Canada people would think like, oh, well, you know, next, you know, I want to have accomplished something by winter, because I know it's going to get really cold and I want to be able blah blah blah, or I want to get a lot of stuff done over the holiday or the winter, because when it's summer I want to be outside. When it's really nice all the time, every day just starts to blend into one another, and time just starts to kind of seep away, and all of a sudden years have gone by and you're like, what happened? Okay, I'm gonna I want to blow dry this, because I'm about to put some tape over top of it And I want to make sure this is nice and dry, because otherwise when I peel that tape off, it's possible that I'll peel off some wet paint. So okay. You know, in retrospect, I probably could do it a little bit more white in the clouds, but as I said, I'm probably going to do that later on. You also might see, I'm often, like, when I'm blow drawing, sometimes I just take my fingers and you see me sort of doing this. One is I'm just trying to make sure it is actually dry. Sometimes if I'm not really careful, I might be building up little bits of texture, and in those textures I might have the outside of it might be dry, but the inside, like a zit, is full of wet paint, like a pus. And you know, if I'm doing this, then I'm going to squeeze the wet paint out or smudge it. So I'm going to be able to do that here while I'm blow drawing and not have a surprise later. Because again, if there is, let's say, a blob here with some pussy white underneath and I put tape over it, that's an area of weakness. And when I peel that tape off, that area which has not dried, it's entirely possible that I'll peel the top surface of white off, and there'll be some either wet paint inside or slightly wet paint, right? I want this to be as dry as possible. I mean, the drier it is, the more effective the next step will be. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put tape on here. Now I don't need to put tape over the whole thing because, you know, I don't need to put tape in this area because what I'm going to do is hide and protect this blue sky which I just painted, right? So really the main thing that I'm thinking about is I'm going to layer the tape a little bit, stagger it, so there's going to be some places where there's a little bit of an overlap with tape. So in my mind, what I'm thinking about is I want to try to make sure that areas where I'm layering the tape are places with the least amount of detail, because it's hard to kind of cut through those two layers of tape. So I'm even thinking about putting this tape on in a diagonal manner. So let's just, I've lost a lot of the original image. So that looks like the bottom. In fact, it looks like this is where that goes. And I'm just going to draw lines, right? This is going to get all covered up with paint, so I don't have to be too worried about making it pretty. Here is the tip of that wing, and I don't know where the tip of this wing is here. It must be somewhere in that area. So what I'm doing is I'm just helping to create little guidelines for myself. and the beak is lost in there somewhere. Okay. So, actually, that means it's probably there. So that's that. Okay. So do you think, because what I would like to be able to do is do this kind of thing. That way all of the most complex detail, which is the tip of the bird's beak, is covered. How much flexibility? I got some pretty wide tape, so I think you know what? Let's just take a second. Alright, I've notated that this is here and that's there. So if I put a line through, okay. So if I did that, that's going to clip off. So I actually want that to be basically right in the middle, that line. Good to know. So there's no, you can do it straight up and down on the side. There's no reason why it has to be diagonal. I'm just, this is what I think might work best for me personally. We'll see. There's a little, you know, when I do things like that, and that tape peeling off in that way does make me a little bit anxious, because I hope that I didn't lose some adhesive property there. So let's just take a second. Going back over my lines. Now, do I want to cut this out? So let's trim that off. And that should mean I'm pretty close to that corner here. Could be slightly crooked. You'll never really know until that's done. so let's... I'm going to use my carbon paper before. I haven't even got a chance to put all this away, so I'm going to take my carbon paper. Let's do this. Let's get another colored pencil out. And I'm just going to go over top of these pencil lines. Okay, so we've got the image back on top here. So let me just clean up a little bit for a second here, because when things get a little bit messy, my mind gets a little bit messy and I get confused, and that's where I might start making mistakes, which I'm sure my wife just laughs at because she's like, oh, really? Well, you tend to be pretty messy all of the time. Okay. Now we'll keep that ruler out here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go over top of my pencil lines. And ensure that this area is going to be nice and stuck down. Got pretty close to that tip of that beak there. Now the rest of the inside doesn't matter so much. Okay. I guess the water, I'm going to paint over that. So do I want a hard edge there or not? So what I'm just thinking about is, do I want to create, I think, yes, I do want to create a hard edge here. Right. I'm telling you, using tape is a bit of a mind warp because you kind of have to think in opposites, because we're going to paint everything and then we want to reveal this later. So it's all like, no matter how much planning and thinking you can do in advance, it's often turns out that goes the opposite way. Now I did just use this box cutter the other day for this painting, the Robert Indiana, right? So it should be pretty sharp, but I want to make sure I'm going to spend this time, I want to do it perfectly. So I'm going to snap this little bit off. Now I got a nice sharp point here. And instead of just throwing this in the garbage, I said this the other day, but maybe not everyone's watching all the time. So it's a good idea for your fellow human beings, and even for yourself or other family members, to not just throw a razor blade into the garbage, because you don't want someone sticking their hand into the garbage, whether it's someone who's picking up the garbage as their job, or someone who's hungry for Christmas looking for food in the garbage bin. That way, we just keep everybody nice and safe, right? Do no harm. Wow, lots of comments here. What? You guys are busy. Deborah says the pandemic has really taken our time frame away. It seems like we have lost over a year and a half. Thank goodness for painting. Well, he likes the paint zits. You have such a way with words. I appreciate that. Well, he says it feels like a couple of years have flown by and haven't really done anything at all. I bet you've done a lot of stuff. But it's one of the things, it's when you're at home all day long, over and over and over, it becomes a little bit hard to kind of feel like, what have I accomplished? Which is one of the reasons why I keep a journal every day. And it's like, I've been keeping a journal throughout my life at different times. And about 4 months before the pandemic hit, I started keeping a journal again after kind of maybe a year of not doing it. I mean, I haven't read back through it, but at some point, you know, when I'm sitting in a rocking chair and my mind is going, well, I have a rocking chair already and my mind is going already, but I'm talking ideally 40, 50 years from now, that would be pretty old, but that I would be able to kind of read through that and be like, oh yes, I remember, yes. Okay, so now I'm going to cut this tape, and again, I just want to make sure, what I also want to do, you see, I've layered the tape, so it's always much easier to cut this way than it is to cut back over the tape that way, because then I run the risk of pulling some of the tape up, right? And we can take our time. And I'm pressing kind of hard because I want to make sure I get through those multiple areas of tape. And if you got a question about whether you got through both layers, it's best to do that now. And one of the things that I realized a little bit when I did the previous love painting is I was very careful and kind of delicate with the surface. Now, you don't want to be cutting too far down because then you're literally going to cut the canvas, right? And then the canvas might come off of the board, or if you're painting on a stretched canvas, you're literally going to cut through, and that really is destabilizing to the canvas. But so I'm not pressing super hard, but I'm also not being maybe super delicate either. Now, as I do the feathers, I'm going to try to kind of keep my blade here on the canvas. So let's just go making sure these thicker areas cut through. Let's zoom in here for... Actually, might as well... oops. I kind of deliberately overcut that just so, and I meant oops because I wasn't on camera, but I just want to make sure that when I peel this tape off, I'm not, those little areas where corners meet can be often places where the paint or the tape lifts up a little bit. Kind of like that little area, see that? Let's just finish this off here. Right, so again, where the tape meets. Now there are these little gaps. Do I want to try to paint that? Cut that out? Let's try cutting it out. How about we'll cut one out and I'll paint one, just so we can see the difference between those. So again, I'm going to start a little bit further. I haven't done this one, did I? Oh, I already cut that one. Ah. Okay, that's hopefully that isn't a problem. Oops. All right, so here's the point. I'm going to start a little bit past that. Let's go back up. All right, you can see I'm going to cross over that corner. Okay, cool. So now let's peel some of this tape off. In fact, if we peel on this side first, let's just right, and if you've really gone and burnished with your fingernail over here, then this tape, where it's cut, it should just easily peel off without affecting or pulling. Oh, you see I cut too deeply. Oh, no! Well, we'll hope that the fluid we... Well, I'm gonna, if there's areas like that, I'm gonna really try to see if I can get my fluid to go underneath those areas. That's, you know, it's that's where I've put, you know, that's the there's benefits and drawbacks to using very sharp knives. If you're doing a lot of this type of thing, you probably want to consider using a board rather than use like an actual wood panel to do a lot of taping rather than actually painting on canvas. Okay, so where did the canvas lift off? It was somewhere around here, wasn't it? Well, we will see. We will see what happens. Oh my goodness. Okay, so once again, make sure that's all burnished down nicely. Okay, so I'm going to use some matte medium. Come on, camera. Why are you having a hard time focusing? So I'm going to use some matte medium to paint So I'm going to use matte medium to just paint over all of these edges. And you know what? I really feel like I cut a little bit hard. This is going to be interesting. Because in some places it feels like the canvas is above the tape, which means I've cut and it's sort of flapping loose. Anyway, we will see. Worst comes to worst, if it is lifts over top, I can always put some glue underneath here at the very end and glaze over the whole, or varnish over the whole thing. We'll keep our fingers crossed. And I don't usually use tape all the time, so it's a bit of an adventure for me as well. Okay, so I'm taking my matte medium, and let's just brush it over top of all of these edges. Now, usually what I say is to be careful about trying to get paint underneath and kind of brush away from the tape. But here I'm actually trying to get maybe a little bit of this medium to go soak underneath the canvas where it attaches to the board. Oh, I forgot to do this. To peel this up here. Ah! What's there? Oh, that's the cloud. Okay. Whew. I thought that was the board underneath here. I don't know about this painting, folks. This is going to be this will be a surprise for me. By the time we get to the end of this painting, I don't know what to expect. So, stay tuned for the drama. So let's blow dry this. Oops. Okay, sorry, I was muted. Okay, so what I'm going to do, when we did the love, what I did is after I got to this step, I painted white over everything to help seal these, because I basically wanted to cover this whole background white, which I'm going to do, but it had the effect of when I peeled, there was a little, in some places, a sliver of white around there, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do is paint the color that I ultimately want there, and then paint white over top, and that was most likely going to create an area where there's not going to be that extra little bit of color, I think, in an ideal world. So what color should we do this? What is that color? It looks like a bit of a cool brown. I think that's what that is, a cool brown. So let's get a bit more cool blue. Where should we do this? Let's do this here. Yeah, let's do that right there. So we're going to take cool blue and cool red. I think we'll need more of it. Okay, so I put that together and it looks very greenish. What that's telling me is that there's way too, well, not way, but there's, right now it's kind of very gray, which is not bad. Actually, we can use this for the background if we want. It's basically like how we normally make our gray, but this is just a bit more of a, on the cooler side as opposed to being a bit more neutral. So let's take a bit more cool red. So now I got that color. Let's get some white. There we go. Took a little bit of time for me to find it, but I think that's what we want here. So this is all just done with cool yellow, cool blue, and cool red. So let's take this color. This time I will try to paint away from the pencil lines. So I'm painting away from these lines, or from the tape, I mean. It's a little tricky in this area here, so I might have a little bit of... I'm going kind of quickly. If I was really doing this for my own thing, I'd be doing it a little bit more carefully, but... Okay, and you know what? I think I'm just going to paint the whole background with this color right now. Instead of, I was going to paint it white, and then I was going to paint it warm yellow. This color is so opaque that we're not really going to see much of whatever's underneath here anyway. So in the interest of just keeping things moving forward, and it's going to get pretty dark up top there. Would be nice to have some warm yellow down there, but just clean that up. Oops, let's back up. So that's where what it looks like. Okay, so let's blow dry this, and I might put a little bit more of that paint just down there on the bottom. Okay, so I still got a bit of paint right here on the bottom. And this is the horizon where we're going to see maybe actually that's pretty dark. Now that I look at it, wow, that's a lot darker than the original, but that's okay. That's okay. I actually kind of I won't mind it once we get going here as well. I think it's going to look kind of a bit of an ominous kind of background. Lolly says, I noticed the bird's head is all white. It might be useful to cut around the head before you remove all the tape so you can make his head stand out. I'm probably gonna... I understand what you're saying, but, you know, you would probably want to do that as a separate layer of tape if you wanted. I think it'll be just easier just to hand paint all of that in. I think you'll see what I mean when we get to that part of the painting. Again, using tape is a mind warp. Like trying to, it is almost impossible to, unless you've been doing it for years, to really be able to plan ahead for how everything is going to go here. Okay, so let's do the sky, the dark sky here next. So we mixed this dark color. We're going to mix more blue into it just to give it a little bit less of a black quality. Because essentially what we mixed here was very, very dark color, which we're going to use, but let's build up to that stage. In fact, it is interesting the way that he's done this, where we've got the blue area up here, and as we just get down here, it just kind of turns into a light gray. And then so you know what, in order to do what he's done, what we actually would probably want to do is glaze with this and then slowly blend it into this. It actually gets bluer the higher we go, which is counterintuitive to the way that I would have probably almost started glazing with this cold blue down here and blend it up into the darker color. So that's interesting. That doesn't, you know, every painting, when you look at a new painting, is going to give you new insights and new suggestions on how to like proceed. And so let's do what he did here. Let's where should we do this? Let's do this right here. We'll take our glazing fluid, put a bunch of it down, and just wipe the brush off. Just take a little bit of the intensity, because we want to start kind of thin, right? So let's start up here. And this is our horizon line down here, so Okay, so it's similar to, we're just doing the clouds again, just in reverse. Instead of doing white clouds on a blue sky, we're doing gray clouds on this kind of burgundy sky. All right, so that's a very, very thin, almost imperceptible layer. Let's blow dry that. Okay. Let's actually do a little bit more as we go higher up here. Okay. Sorry, I forget to unmute the microphone. I don't know if we missed much, but... glazing fluid in here. And, you know, if you, worst comes to worst, like if you're having a hard time blending, you know, comes with clouds horizontally, right, as opposed to diagonally or vertically, so that, because clouds, at least to help give the experience of depth, you know, they often will layer out with these kind of lines, right? So that would be my suggestion, is to think about creating horizontal stripes almost. Okay, let's blow dry again. You know, this painting, like the colors that I'm using here are going to be very different than, you know, this purple kind of brownish color is totally different than his, right? So that's going to result in we're just going to have very different paintings. And it's, you know, it goes to show that, like, a decision made at one stage of the painting will affect the rest of the painting. But, oops. That's okay. In fact, it's kind of cool, especially when we get closer towards the end here, when we peel that tape off. Okay, I'm going to take some of this cool blue and mix it into here now. So far we've just been kind of a very neutral, well, it's more of a cold gray. So let's take glazing fluid in here. How are we doing? Okay, this is gonna be interesting. I am, you know, especially like we have no idea. I have no idea how this will ultimately turn out, because this is such a radically different color than anything else we have thus far on here. So it's going to be interesting. Let's blow dry that, and then we're gonna just keep on going here. And as I go, I'm probably gonna get less and less gray into that blue. Or actually, I think what he's doing is taking a little bit of white and adding a bit of that white into this mixture. So let's experiment with that as well. Right, you can see I'm not using a ton of it, especially not at this stage. We're just going to build a bit in here. Okay. Now I've been kind of all over. Now I'm going to start kind of thinking about building up some little patches here. Just going to wipe off all that excess paint. Okay. I think one more little bit with this slightly more white. You can see I'm not using my blending brush, right, because I can kind of just blend this out with a large surface like this. I can blend it out with just the, as my paintbrush gets a little bit drier, I can just use that as its own blending brush. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my dark color, and I want to glaze this dark color back in here. Okay, so I'm out of my dark color, but that's okay because I want to mix a darker dark. This was a kind of a gray, a cold dark color. I want something maybe a little bit warmer as these clouds get a little bit closer to us. So I'm gonna still take my cold blue. We'll mix it right in here because it's gonna be dark. It doesn't, and let's take some warm red. This time I haven't used any of my warm yellow, so let's just take some warm yellow, mix it in here. Now we got a kind of a bit of a warmer brown. That just tells us we've got a lot of yellow and red. Now we need to balance it out with a bit more blue again to get it back to a dark color. And there we are. I think that's pretty good. That's a nice dark color again. I usually use my cool yellow, but I'm out of it and I hadn't used any of that warm yellow yet. It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty darn close. Let's get a bit more of this blue in there. And you notice we haven't used any of the cool or the warm blue yet, because that's coming. That's going to be in the water down below. So I'm going to use a different brush. Oh, this one has something dried in there. That was a brush I didn't clean properly. You don't want too much paint on there as we go. I mean, I'm hoping that this will have a really neat kind of gradation, a very unusual dark sky like this. But you never know. I mean, I could be. I'm always surprised, and that's a good thing. I want to be surprised. Okay, and I think let's just do one more darker glaze here. And this time I may also use just a blending brush just to soften out some of the darkest areas. Okay, I'm going to take more black and just try to get just a bit more like real solidity in these clouds at the very top here. Okay, that might be enough for that part of the painting. Whew, okay. Now we want to do the bottom of the painting. So the question in my mind is, should I take the tape off now and do this, or wait until I've done the water? If I paint, I kind of want to disguise a bit of this, but that will resist. Let me blow dry this. Okay, I think you can see the table sort of, as you blow dry this kind of cutting mat warps a little bit temporarily. I think the best thing, I was hoping to leave the peeling of the tape to the very, very end, which is very satisfying. But I think what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to paint this white, just paint it right out, and then I'm going to paint yellow on top of it, and then I'm going to paint blue on top of it. So if I leave the tape here and I paint all that out, the danger is I peel this off, I'm actually going to have this extra little hard edge here, and I don't want that hard edge, because I want this to be in front of everything, right? And if I paint this now, then the bird will be in front of everything, or it's, yeah. So let's peel some tape. So let's go to this view here. And we got the overlapping tape, so I think I'm going to start with one side and peel up the wing first. Make sure my fingers are kind of as clean as possible before I go any further. Ah! See that? Look at the canvas pulling away. That's going to be an issue today, for sure. But, you know, you got to make those mistakes in order to learn, right? So hopefully everyone is learning from all my mistakes. You go nice and slow. Nice and slow. Now when I get close to this corner here, I want to be careful. Okay, that looks pretty good so far. The more difficult part now is the in fact, let's just zoom back out so you can kind of see. Looks pretty good so far, right? But we got a lot more detail in this side here, so paint, this tape. Okay. Can you see that? That's actually the canvas that pulled away. I cut so deep. That's a little bit of canvas. Let's just keep it rather than throw it away. So let's just peel it off. I mean, it's lucky that it matches this color. Yeah, let's just put it there for right now. See, it tore a bit. Tape there. Looks like the tape has torn a bit. The canvas up there is peeled away right up here. Ay, ay, ay. So I scratched it a little bit just while I'm right here. Just take a bit of my glaze. Okay, so let's just back out so you can see what this looks like at this stage. I mean, not bad. Not bad. Besides the fact that some of the canvas came off, let's just, where can I put this in a, I'll just save that for right now. So, worse things could have happened. I'm not too bummed out about that. Now let's do the horizon line here. So let's just make, we're going to paint these waves in separately here. Okay, so it doesn't quite go over top of that, but that's okay. Let's, what should we use? Let's use just some plain white. Got a bunch of brushes that need to be cleaned. Let's move that out of the way. Lolly says, you definitely make these lessons more fun and inspiring by sometimes going off track a little, just doing your own thing. It makes it much more exciting than simply copying every single thing. I am feeling inspired by your classes very much lately. Thank you. I appreciate that, Lolly. That's very kind of you to say. I mean, one of the reasons why I've been doing so many of them is because for me it's a real nice break from everything else that I do, and it gives me an opportunity to experiment in ways that I probably wouldn't do in my own artwork, right? Because as a professional artist, you kind of get into some habits, and you've got a way of working, and you say, this is the way I do things. Even though I tell my students, well, at least when you're in school, when I hear students go like, no, that's not the way I do it. That's not the way I make paintings. I go like, well, then you know what? You should just get up and leave the school, because what on earth are you doing here? And because if you've already got a way of doing it, then by all means, keep doing it. There's no need for you to spend all of this money racking up student debt if you've already got a way of going about things. Okay. It looks a little bit crooked, doesn't it? Is it just me? Maybe the painting isn't straight. And then this line keeps going up, and then I realize, oh, the painting was... Okay. That also just cleans it up, and it's like, oh, that looks much better all of a sudden. It doesn't look so uneven. So I'm going to blow dry that. I'm actually going to paint my warm yellow down on the bottom, in case you're wondering. I'm going to paint that. That's just going to help give this a nice warm glow in the bottom, because we're going to be using, we use this warm glow in here. I want this back down here as well. Paula talks about using masking fluid. You could use... I've never actually used masking fluid for acrylic paint. I guess if you painted your acrylics relatively thin, masking fluid would work. The danger is if you build up texture with masking fluid, the masking fluid isn't strong enough to keep itself together to peel off like tape. So if you're painting very, very thin layers, like I was like some of these it's pretty thick, that paint. So if you're careful, you could get away with it, absolutely. Good suggestion, Paula. Let's take, so this is my warm yellow from at the very beginning. It's, you know, there's a lot of the water's evaporated, so it's going to be a little bit more opaque than normal, than the first layer. I mean, that's kind of cool just like that too, right? I mean, yeah, yeah. I could see people being like, yeah, I really didn't keep it like that. It's kind of cool. Kind of cool. So I haven't even looked at these side by side to see how we're doing comparison-wise. Yeah, very different purpley color, obviously, right? It's probably a little bit confusing to see that like that. When we get this to be a warmer blue down here, it'll change again. Okay, now let's we're gonna paint with some warm blue and white. All right, this warm blue's just been sitting there the whole time, patiently going. Yeah, I mean, are you gonna use? Are you? Do I get to play or what? Everyone else has been on the painting except me, and I feel so sad, and no one's painting with me. Don't worry, warm blue. We're coming for you. We didn't forget. You were there the whole time. Add just a bit of matte medium in here. Make it a little bit more transparent, so I don't destroy all this yellow that I just put down here. It's going to be there in just a little bit. Okay. Okay, Deborah said the masking tape worked okay, but I had to do some tiny repairs. Which is not surprising, right? And as if you were to be doing this type of a process over and over and over again, and it's a big part of your art, then of course you're going to get better and better. Oh, it looks like this brush is. Look how the bristles are coming out. That looks like this brush is a goner. And it just shed all over here. So I'm going to blow dry that. weird. So weird audio stuff going on here. The system seems to kind of crash every hour or so, and then it does weird things. And okay. So let's just take a look at how he's done the water here. You can see that there's a bit of this kind of brown or warm yellow underneath everything under here. Now, so I'm just trying to think about how I want to progress to the next step. We're going to use warm blue. I'm going to mix some cold yellow, I think, in here. We'll take a little bit of almost a bit of a turquoise. So cold yellow, cold blue, but we'll mix warm blue into it to keep it more in the foreground. And then we'll use a lot of warm blues in the darker areas just to pull it forward. But what's kind of nice is he's got these reflections from the bird on top of the water you see here. So we'll put that color back in at some point as well. So, yeah. Let's take, we got our warm blue, we got white. Need some more cool blue on the palette, and a little bit more warm yellow on the palette. I'm going to try to finish up here within the next hour at the latest. I don't want to be spending too much longer on just this little sliver of painting in the bottom. So let's take our cool yellow and our cool blue. Mix that together. Let's see if we start with this color going into the blue. Instead of adding more cool blue into the mixture, we'll have a little bit more warm blue in here. Not bad. Oops. Okay. So let's take a smaller brush. Actually, no, I should put a little bit of glazing fluid in there just to make my life a little bit easier as I blend all of this. Zoom in. Okay, I'm going to start in the middle here. So you can take a smaller brush. very subtle, but... And then what we've got, this big wave here. And then another one right here. Okay, so we're gonna blow dry this. That's our initial layer. Let's go back to doing this again. And you can always just take a brush and we're just going left to right, just like the clouds. I want everything to be kind of horizontal. Now, for all sorts of reasons, I'm not going to spend nearly as much time on the water as he did, because he's got a lot of detail down here. think I'm going to take this. I'm going to blow dry this, and I might actually take the color I just put down and go over top of a lot of this. And just, especially darken things down just a little bit. Which brush should we use? It's going to take... I just sort of accidentally wiped a bit away on this last little pass, but I wanted to kind of just get a bit more of that color everywhere. So I lost a little bit of detail, but that's okay because the detail is going to keep coming back, and we've got a bit of this color now. We're kind of, it's the same colors that are in the sky, which is exactly what I want. I guess I gotta blow dry it. Okay, there's Deborah says, wow, Michael, I love your horizon. It almost looks like a sunset. I have to go now, but I'll finish and I'll post tomorrow. Rick is waiting for me to have some supper. Rick is so glad to hear you're painting Magritte, who is his favorite artist. Awesome! Well, say hi to Rick for me. I'd love to see Rick attempt to do some of the Magritte paintings we've done. Let's go down to here again. So let's darken this color. Let's put a little bit more warm blue in here as we get closer to the front of the picture. Very super subtle, so let's I'm going to blow dry that. Let's keep on adding a little bit more. Let's get glazing fluid. Let's take the same red that we had, or red, but as different of red as from red as possible, and our warm blue. Okay. I still feel like that's still too light. But I just got to keep moving forward because I just want to wrap up this ASAP. Okay, so I gotta blow dry all that wet. Okay, so what I want to do now, I want to put a little bit of white caps onto this water. Let's get some white. It's taking white. I guess this is, let's get a little bit more glazing fluid. That same paint, but let's get some white into it. Let's look at this here. Okay, okay. I gotta take a second here. I got paintbrush. I'm rushing, and I got paintbrushes that are now brushing up against my wet canvas. So let's just take a second and just clean up. You know, it's like my favorite saying is, we're in a hurry, so slow down. I'm getting paint all over the place. So that's when things just start snowballing and problems get bigger and bigger, and before you know it, you're tearing your hair out and all this stuff. So let's just take a second. Okay. Let's go back to the painting. So yeah, really, ideally it should be much darker than this, but let's just... So I'm kind of just stuttering my brush. Over the surface here. And generally, wherever it's kind of dark, on top it should be a little bit lighter, right? Because that's where the wave, the top of the wave, is the white cap, right? We'll zoom back out. And as we get a little bit closer to the foreground, I kind of, rather than just these big, large, solid areas, I kind of just allow a bit more of this kind of dotted line to form. Bottom of the painting here. Might have a bit more of it. And as we get closer to the foreground, these waves are going to get more and more white on top and darker underneath. As I said, I could probably walk away right now, but I do want to get it a little bit darker underneath these waves. So let's continue with this color we've got here. Let's get a bit more green back into it. Now I'm just looking at where I've done some of these white caps. I'm just going to get a little bit darker. And then when we start getting closer into here, I'm literally gonna let's zoom in here. I'm kind of doing the hokusai kind of thing, right? The big wave and kind of trying to shape it. So let's back out. You can see that, you know, right now it looks a little bit rough, kind of almost kind of more impressionist kind of thing. We're going to continue building up some of this darkness. So let's just take a bit more warm blue. I'm also going to take a bit of my black. darker. And if I can always take my blending brush or just any other brush, just come in here. I think what would be fun to do would be to do a painting by a seascape artist. We haven't really, have we done a seascape? I don't think we've done a seascape. Now that I'm painting this, I'm like, we've gone all these episodes without really painting water, have we? So we gotta do that. Okay. Just looking, it looks like this area is going to get darker. Yeah, okay. I mean, there's things I'd like to focus more on, but actually, let's blow dry that before I put, because I'm starting to kind of get close to wrapping up. I don't know how much more. I might do a little bit more of a darker color, but for the most part, I'm just going to put the white caps on here and then maybe wrap up. So. So we'll put white caps on top of here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to blow dry that again. Was it muted and then that's what happens when you go fast, right? I think I just blew out everyone's ears. Loud audio. Let's get a bit more of this cool blue into the white. Because we want to add just a hint of this cool blue reflection from the bird above. Okay, now I'm just finishing up with some little specks of pure white on here to catch the light. Now, as promised, I'm going to come back up into the bird here. I'm taking my white. Actually, you know what? Let's go to white and blue. And now I'm going to take just pure white on its own. And if we need to punch up any of these clouds at all, extra little bits of highlights. You know, Thomas Kincaid would say, like, you can never put too much white in these highlights. You can just keep on going and going and going, and it just seems to brighten up and brighten up and brighten up. Yeah, I think, I mean, I would like to work for another couple of hours on that water, but is it gonna... I think it just starts... It's like, I'd rather put that time into my own paintings. I think that's good. Let's zoom out. So, I mean, there's lots of differences between these two paintings, beyond obviously the color down here being quite different. You know, it's interesting that this sky is darker and this sky is lighter, and that's just something that just it kind of happened by chance, because there's no way for... I thought that was about as dark as it needed to go. But, you know, I was also being confused when I was looking at how dark this was, right? So I thought, okay, well, this needs to be lighter. And then I didn't quite mix the right color here, right? I wanted something that was kind of a very light, cool brown, and I just didn't add nearly enough white in there, or yellow, really. But, you know, so it's got a bit more of a more intense sunset-y color. You know, it's got that, you know, like the sun is way down on the other south, or not south, well, I guess kind of south. It's below the water, right? The sun is really set, and now we just have the ambient warm or light coming up, reflecting off of the atmosphere. This down here, the water, could be much darker, for sure. Like all of this, you know, it's you know, he did a great job of... This looks like kind of nighttime water. Mine looks a little bit like nighttime in places and daylight in places. So you saw where I started to try to glaze and try to darken that down. I'm even tempted at this very moment to go and take some of this purple and delicately glaze it into the top here. But then I would also have to go and do the white caps again, and it's just sort of like, do I want to do that? Now I'm thinking maybe I do want to do it. Let me just blow dry this here. Okay. I am just gonna do a little glaze really quickly. Paula says, you should go have Christmas dinner with your family. Don't worry, I'm not missing Christmas dinner. I can see in our baby monitor our daughter is fast asleep here. It took her a while to fall asleep, so we'll probably not be eating for a little while here. So I'm just taking this. This is the same color I put in the background in the sky here. So I just have this instinct to want to put a bit of it on top of the water here. actually, that's helping to give it a bit more of a nighttimey feel. I kind of like that. I have to be careful. I'm kind of getting a little, being a bit impatient. I'm slathering it on. That actually has, I feel, changed. It's done what I wanted to do, is to get a little bit darker. So I'm just putting, I mean, obviously the water is the reflection of the sky, right? Water isn't inherently blue. It's only blue because of the light that's being diffused through the sky and reflecting, right? So that actually made a huge difference. Very subtle little change, but and I don't know how well it comes across on camera. Just a little bit of highlights back. Part of me's like, I think it's looking better, but my eyes are starting to get a little bit crossed, so I think it's better. But later on, when my eyes uncross, I could be like, whoa, what, how did, oh no. Okay, yeah, I think that's a big improvement. And Laurie says the glaze makes a huge difference. Awesome. Good. Good. Okay, I'm definitely done now. Definitely done. But sometimes you just gotta follow your instinct a little bit, and if it doesn't work out, especially if you're using glaze and if the surface is dry before you put the glaze on, you can wipe the paint away. Well, it took a little bit of time to get there. Oh, a few little detours along the way, but we got there. I like the way it turns out, or the way it looked, so it's all worth it in the end. All right. Okay, thank you everyone for joining me for painting along. You know, I also appreciate those of you that have spent your Christmas day with me today. And those of you that celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. Those of you that don't celebrate Christmas, Happy... I don't even know what... Is it a Friday today? Saturday? Happy Saturday. We are going to be doing a Kwanzaa painting in a couple of days. So I'm trying to be as inclusive as possible and to help everyone get through the holidays, which is not always easy anyway, but under the circumstances this year it's even more difficult than maybe it's been in a long time. So tomorrow we're going to do a Boxing Day painting. We're going to be painting a very famous painting by George Bellows that happens to feature two people boxing. It's a little bit funny, but George Bellows is again probably in my top 10 favorite artists of all time, so I'm really excited to do this. Painting has been influential to me, so I'm excited to cover that. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because I'm not even exactly sure when tomorrow's episode will air. So you'll be able to know, you'll see that notification like, oh, Michael's going to change the time of the upcoming episode, so you'll know when that is or when I post other videos. There's a PayPal link in the description below, so if you wanted to leave a donation, I appreciate your donations, and that's how all of this stuff, the paint, the shelves, all that stuff is from your generous contributions. So thank you everyone for joining me again. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your holiday if you're celebrating. If not, can't wait to see your paintings. Upload a version of it, and we'll take a look at it in the early year. Good night, everybody.